Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi channel. Don't forget to subscribe and explore. Ash drifted like scorched feathers through ruptured steel ribs overhead, sagging under sky the color of bruised bone. A smell clung to the metal, old plasma, burnt protein, something sweet rotting beneath. Wind didn't reach this low. Heat had no exit. Light slanted in through a jagged slit high above, not enough to see by, just enough to feel watched. Boot steps dropped slow onto the graded ramp. Each one pressed against a soft crunch that wasn't debris. Something organic had dried unevenly across the floor. Not blood. Not quite. Beyond the first bend, walls peeled with blistered laminate, warped from fire too contained to escape. Machinery lay cracked open, gears exposed like chewed bone. The corridor narrowed toward a split bulkhead, half melted, crimped inward from concussive force. Past it, darkness took over. Not blank. Breathing. Nothing moved when the flashlight stayed off. But each pause in motion carried sound that didn't belong to settling metal. Breaths too shallow to be natural. No rhythm. Held too long. Dropped too short. Another step. A cable snapped loose beneath, coiling back into shadow. Still no voice. No challenge. No machine activation. Nothing hostile enough to announce itself. Just tension pressing in against the ribs. Left wall, a split in the flooring wide enough to wedge a shoulder into. Movement at the corner of sight. Not enough to name. Just enough to force stillness. Hand hovered near the grip. Not drawn. Not yet. No weapon cried out here. No threat dared make itself loud. Somewhere behind a crushed support column, another sound. Short. Wet. Too soft for animal, too raw for speech. A shape hunched low. Not lunging. Just still. Covered in soot, skin or suit hard to tell. Hair tangled with wire. Eyes refused the light. Hid from it. Closer now. No breath taken unless one was given. The stink had changed. Beneath the chemical burn, something human clung to it. Not just death, shame baked into the walls. Shapes of past struggle etched into the floor by something desperate to remain unseen. Glass cracked beneath a step. Not shatter. Bend. A pod half buried under debris strained inward, as if something once tried to escape from the inside, failed, and tried again. Another step forward. The thing behind the column didn't retreat. Didn't challenge. Just watched. Maybe hadn't moved in hours. Maybe couldn't. A whisper scraped low across the ground. Not words. Just a rasp. Then came the voice. Not loud. Not begging. Not even asking. Don't touch me. Words dripped like oil across metal. I'm worthless. Nothing but filth. No weapon raised. No command spoken. No motion offered in return. Just the sound of breathing, hers, rough as broken glass dragged across a dry throat. And his, tighter now. Not out of fear. Recognition had no sound. But it changed everything. Light sliced through the dark like a wound, trembling across shattered equipment and sagging cables. Dust danced through the beam, slow, unsure, as if aware it wasn't meant to be seen. The floor ahead dipped slightly, cracked in multiple veins, curling upward in places where pressure had once forced it to yield. A shape snapped into view. Not by movement, but by absence, something interrupting the light. Small. Compressed. Half-folded behind mangled consoles and twisted pipework. Skin like ash-pale parchment stretched too thin. Elbows locked tight to ribs. Knees drawn into her chest. Every bone counted twice. Mouth opened without sound. Teeth uneven. Gums darkened. Lips cracked. A growl almost formed, low, defensive, close to feral, but collapsed before it left her throat. Not aggression. Bracing. Rags hung in strips off collarbones, fused into dirt and synthetic thread. Nails curled with grime. Each breath strained upward, as if lungs feared expanding in front of another soul. Legs twitched. Not to flee. Just instinct, raw and misfired. Eyes reflected nothing. No moisture. No trust. Pale irises washed thin by something long ago burned out. Yet they burned. Not with rage. With exposure. She saw herself through him and wanted to vanish. Shoulders hunched as if expecting a strike. Spine tilted to block the face, preserve what little shape dignity hadn't been scraped from. But she didn't run. Didn't scream. Didn't speak again. The light stayed fixed. A mistake. It caught her full, every rib pressing skin outward, every blemish no longer hidden. Jaw tightened. Muscles seized. The body reacted before the mind had word. Stillness fought to become silence. It failed. Breaths continued to betray presence. Rustling cloth. The creak of her grip tightening around her ankles. Once this room held process. Control. Rows of terminals now bent into unrecognizable shape. Her shape didn't belong. It had never belonged. She bared her teeth. Not to threaten, but to disappear. If she made herself animal, maybe she wouldn't be woman. If she looked wild enough, maybe she wouldn't be touched. Light moved off her, just slightly. Not away. Just enough. A gesture without promise. She didn't relax. The space between them stretched thin. Too many questions already asked without sound. Too many answers given through posture. Metal overhead groaned, distant and slow. She flinched. One hand jerked upward as if to shield her face. Then froze midair. As if remembering there was no strike to meet it. The light lowered. The beam pointed to the ground between them. Dust thickened again. Breathing slowed. Still no step forward. She hadn't spoken since those words, brittle and raw. Maybe they cost more than he knew. Maybe they weren't for him at all. Maybe they were just memory, rehearsed until it felt safe to whisper again. A cough tried to rise. She suppressed it. Too loud. Her body didn't move, but her eyes followed. Not trusting. Not forgiving. But watching. Testing the space. Measuring its edges. No weapon aimed. No voice spoke. The floor buzzed faintly beneath them, some power loop still buried in the wreckage. A reminder that systems had existed once. Orders. Control. She had no part in those anymore. A shard of glass near her foot reflected her outline. She caught it, stared, recoiled, kicked it aside without force. Not from disgust. From shame. She knew what she looked like. And still, she didn't run. The barrel dipped first, slow enough to be seen but not heard. Fingers uncurled from the grip with no sound of metal, no click to mark the act. Not a surrender. Not submission. Just quiet refusal to be what this place had demanded from too many. Her body reacted before thought caught up. Shoulders jolted back, arms locked tighter around her legs, heels scraping against metal. She didn't break eye contact. Couldn't. That stare wasn't trust, it was bracing for what usually came after mercy. A single step forward brought no threat. No sound beyond softened breath and the shift of cloth against gear. She shrank harder into herself, bones pressing skin toward retreat that had no path. One more inch forward and she would scream. Not with her voice. With every motion trained into her frame by others who had touched too often and meant nothing by it. When the foot lifted again, she hissed through clenched teeth. Words poured raw, acid-wet, thick with a certainty that didn't come from belief but from repetition. Don't touch me. Not loud. Not broken. Not pleading. Just final. The rest followed too fast to be thought. I'm worthless. Nothing but filth. Not apology. Not confession. More like a label she wore because someone carved it deep enough to survive hunger and time. She waited for disgust. Waited for the turn. Waited for what always followed when men heard that tone in her voice, when they saw dirt not just on her skin but in her shape. Nothing came. He lowered. Not crouched. Not leaned. Knees met steel without a sound. Back straight. Eyes level. No tension in the jaw. No gesture toward pity. Her breath hitched. Not from comfort. Because the script didn't account for that. This wasn't how it went. Something twitched behind her eyes, flickering past memory. Not warmth. Not safety. Just confusion sharp enough to sting. She blinked hard. Didn't understand why her own voice hadn't pushed him away. It always worked. He didn't touch her. Didn't offer a hand. Just stayed still, eyes focused not on the dirt, not on the scars, but on the space between them, as if watching that was more important than reaching across it. She spoke again. Same words. Quieter. Not to test. To correct. As if maybe he hadn't heard right. I'm nothing. Still no answer. Still no weapon. The light on the floor dimmed behind his body, letting shadow do what cloth couldn't, cover her without judgment. She watched him for weakness. For hunger. For revulsion. Found none. The silence stretched long, but not empty. Air thickened between them. Pressure rose not from threat, but from her body's confusion at not being punished for existing. A place like this should have kept its rules. Should have reminded both of them what came next. It didn't. Something in her chest tightened. Not a sob. Not a scream. Just muscle remembering how to hold tension in new shape. He waited. She didn't move. And still, no touch. The report said tech salvage. No specifics. No serials. Just low-yield scrap recovered from Sector 9's interior vaults. Heat-warped beyond function, marked for transport, not study. No one asked more. No one wanted debris from a Volari-controlled zone. They signed off without blinking. Debris was what the place made. He carried her wrapped in thermal mesh, weight too light for a body, shape too uneven for gear. No questions. No contact. No scans. Just a bypass through loading access, shielded from overhead. Inside, she didn't move. Didn't breathe too loudly. Knew how to be object. In quarters barely wider than a crawl tunnel, she stayed curled behind crates that once held power cells. No blanket. No mat. Just dark enough to pretend she wasn't there. When the door locked, she opened her eyes. When it unlocked, she vanished from view. Food sat untouched for hours. When he turned, she didn't reach. When he faced her, she stopped chewing. Swallowed dry. Eyes down. Always down. She never asked what day it was. Never asked what came next. When the light shut off, she stayed upright, knees clutched to chest. Sleep never started on command. Her body waited for command. None came. He hummed once, low and tuneless, while reassembling a diagnostic tool. Metal clicked. Breath filled space. The sound cut through her posture like heat through frost. Shoulders dropped 2 fingers lower. Spine curved. Minutes later, her head touched wall. She never said thank you. Never said please. Words came only in fragments, each one shaped like rust. I shouldn't be here. You're wasting time. I don't matter. Each line arrived without inflection, like she wasn't even speaking to him. He didn't argue. Didn't reply. Just kept moving through routine. No ceremony. No announcement. Just the pattern. She memorized his steps. Knew when boots hit metal. Knew how long it took for the latch to engage. When something changed in the rhythm, when emotion paused longer than usual, her gaze sharpened. Not concern. Anticipation. Waiting to be told it was over. The corner where she stayed began to smell of sealed breath and unwashed skin. She never complained. Never touched the basin. Never asked for clothing. When he placed new fabric beside her, simple, clean, rough-edged, she waited a full hour before touching it. Still wore the old one 2 days longer. He kept the lights dim. No orders came through. No one searched. No alarm sounded. She never asked why. One night, she whispered, "Don't keep wasting food." Voice didn't hold defiance. Just weariness. The kind that came from rationing hope in smaller and smaller portions. He didn't answer. Left the ration anyway. She didn't eat that time. Next day she did. But only after the door clicked shut behind him. Water was the same. Always full. Never acknowledged. Drunk only in absence. Once, her hand reached for the wrong container. Knocked it over. The clang startled her like a strike. She recoiled. Waited. Breath caught. Eyes locked on his face. No reaction came. No blow. No scolding. Just quiet motion, Pick up, reset, nothing more. That silence unsettled her more than yelling. She knew how to endure cruelty. Mercy was a language her body no longer translated. At night, when the hum returned, barely music, barely rhythm, her head lowered. She didn't close her eyes. Just listened, as if trying to remember if the sound meant safety, or if it ever had. The first piece came without warning. A whisper during a ration drop, eyes unfocused, voice flat. Not shared. Released. Grown. Not born. She said it like fact, like dust, like waste in a drain. Her mouth stayed still after the words, like she'd said too much. No follow-up. No elaboration. Just silence stretched between walls. Later, her hand brushed the mark near her collarbone. Not a scar. A code, once scannable, now faded. She didn't explain it. Just pressed fingers there and looked away. Next piece arrived 2 nights after. Rain hammered the exterior shell. She sat awake, unmoving, spine drawn tight against the crate edge. Pleasure. Pain. Obedience. The syllables dropped separate. Not a sentence. Not a memory. Labels. Each one carried a weight she didn't explain. Her shoulders twitched after the last. Once. Like something crawled beneath skin and didn't find its way out. He didn't ask. She wouldn't have answered. In the morning, she pointed at the corner vent. Said nothing at first. Touched the edge. Her mouth opened. Closed. Tried again. That's where they piped in the scent. To keep us responsive. Her hands dropped to her knees. Words stopped. Another day passed. Nothing said. On the floor near her sleeping spot, a strand of hair curled in on itself. She held it up to the light, squinting, lips parting slightly. Not in awe. In recognition. Degradation. That's what they called it. A pause. When it starts, they don't fix you. They don't scold. They just stop calling you. No tears. No emotion. Just report. When the decay spread past her spine, they measured her response time. Logged the data. Recorded how long it took for her to flinch from a raised hand instead of lean into it. Her performance dip. That word made her pause. Performance. As if she still owed it something. They sealed the vault. Left rations near the door. Less each cycle. She dragged them to her corner with cracked nails and bitten palms. Held on to usefulness longer than she should have. When the food stopped, she waited longer. Didn't scream. Didn't beg. Just watched the red light above the bulkhead stay off for 6 cycles straight. That meant final clearance had been given. Sealed to expire. Her fingers traced invisible shapes on her leg, patterns only she recognized. Old routines. Calming motions that no longer worked. Sometimes they'd say we were beautiful. That came soft, almost tender. But only when they wanted to test thresholds. She said no name. No identifier. No origin number. Only one word when asked who she was. Nothing. It left her mouth too easily. He never used it. Never repeated it. Just stood across the room, still and silent, as if refusing to let that word mean what she thought it did. She noticed. But didn't say it. Didn't trust it. Her voice quieted after that. Not because the story ended, but because the pieces she'd given had started to take shape. And the shape scared her more than the memory. Some things are easier to survive when they stay shapeless. A low pulse blinked on the wall console. Read. Not a warning. Not yet. Just a prompt waiting for denial. External sweep completed. Internal scan pending. Clearance required. His fingers hovered over the pad longer than protocol allowed. Thumbprint delayed. Recognition too fast to register hesitation. Screen closed. Alert logged. Up in the upper grate, barely wider than a shoulder, dust clung to fabric barely thicker than paper. She didn't breathe. Not fully. Not enough to move lint. Knees locked. Back twisted between coolant piping and a cracked support strut. Metal scraped skin raw with every shift, but she didn't flinch. Pain meant little when silence mattered more. Outside the door, boots thudded in a pattern that didn't belong to routine patrol. Double heel drag. Armor squeaked. Too many sets. Not a check. Not a walk-through. An entrance. She pressed one hand flat against the mesh beneath her. The hum of air circulation hid her heartbeat. She watched shadows multiply across the room. One officer at first. 3 more behind. No questions. No greetings. Just movement. The kind made by people who already knew something. He stood in the center of the room, jacket unzipped, palms down, no gesture toward defense. The question came low. Blunt. Something's reading heat from an unregistered organic. Explanation required. He didn't answer right away. Let them wait. A glance toward the vent never happened. He leaned against the table, let weight shift slowly. Breathing calm. No twitch. No panic. Just a man with no need to lie, which made the lie harder to trace. Pulled salvage from Vault 9, he said. Some of it's trace-bonded. Heat signatures ghost out for a cycle or 2. Equipment thinks it's alive. Already filed the report. Checked out 3 days ago. One of them scanned again. Frown tightened. Signals fresh. Metal beneath her ribs creaked. She froze. He shrugged. Field gear recharges. Old tech runs hot. Could be anything. Want me to pull it out? A pause. Long, too long. One officer stepped forward, ran a sweep across the storage corner. Scanner buzzed. Static interference. He smiled. Must be that old shielding plate. Been meaning to replace it. Some of the older alloys mess with your readers. The one in charge narrowed their eyes. You live alone? Always have. She watched his lips. Studied each vowel. Every sound threaded with something tight. Not nerves. Anchors. He wasn't defending himself. He was building a wall. They walked through the rest of the room. Looked under the cot. Opened a drawer. Didn't touch the crate near the wall. She didn't blink. Didn't cry. Didn't let her back shudder no matter how loud their boots landed on the floor below her. The officer closest to the vent paused once. Eyes lingered upward. She saw her own reflection in his visor, twisted by mesh, blurred by breath marks, barely there. He said nothing. Turn. No violations log. They left without apology. Doors sealed behind them. The moment they were gone, her knees gave. Quietly. One leg bent too far. A soft thud sounded behind the metal, too faint for anyone outside. He didn't move toward her. Didn't call her name. He just sat back down at the table. Picked up the tool he'd been using before. Hummed a few bars of something without melody. Her fingers curled over the metal lip. She didn't come down. But she watched him. Not because she didn't trust him. Because she didn't understand why he'd lied. He waited until her feet touched floor again. Waited without calling, without coaxing, without pressure. Days passed between the scan and her descent. She came down without warning, barefoot, soundless, ribs more shadow than shape. Eyes didn't meet his. Shoulders hovered in a space between collapse and defense. He spoke with his back turned. Not to avoid her. To give her the choice to leave. You think I'm helping you because you're broken. Silence stretched. She didn't move. You're wrong. His hands rested on the edge of the table, palms flat, knuckles pale. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't add weight to the words. Let them fall in sequence, like truths he'd held in too long. I'm helping you because you're alive. The last word held something different. Not softness. Not force. Just meaning she couldn't name. Her breath stalled in her throat. She stepped once. Not forward. Not away. Just sideways into the edge of the light. He didn't turn. She stared at his spine. Counted the seams on his shirt. Saw the tension at his neck. Not anger. Not fear. Something deeper. Something quieter. The word alive circled in her chest like it didn't belong there. Her hand lifted. Not out of need. Not by accident. She placed 2 fingers against his forearm. His skin was warmer than she expected. She didn't pull away. Didn't speak. Didn't flinch. He didn't move. Didn't breathe louder. Didn't meet her touch with anything more than stillness. That stillness gave her permission. Her fingers curled slightly. Not for comfort. Not for safety. but because, for the first time, no one told her she had to. A black line cut through the atmosphere hours before the signal registered. No one saw the vessel descend. Not the tower, not the outer perimeter. Only the comms feed stuttered. Only the wind shifted without direction. He checked his console. No warning issued. No protocol activated. No chain of command initiated. But she felt it. Her back straightened before any alert. Head turned without sound. Eyes found the sky through reinforced glass. Lips parted without breath. They're here. Not a guess. Not fear. Recognition. He moved fast. Not panic. Not loud. Just efficient. The way someone moves when they know time's no longer theirs. She didn't follow. She stepped back. Already deciding. I should go. The words landed soft, but final. She stood with arms loose at her sides, head bowed, voice stripped of protest. If I leave, they won't. She couldn't finish it. He turned. Sharp. You think this is about them? She didn't respond. You think surrender protects anyone? Her shoulders lifted. Barely. Enough to show she did. He stepped closer. Close enough for silence to matter more than speech. You're not theirs. She looked up. You never were. She shook her head. That's not how it works. He didn't argue. He walked to the wall panel, opened the compartment, keyed the override. Lights shifted. Guns activated. Turrets locked inward, not at the room, but the doors. Defense grid live. He turned. Held out the weapon. She didn't reach for it. He didn't push. Just waited. Her fingers touched the grip like it might reject her. The metal didn't hum. Didn't burn. Didn't mark. It welcomed. She looked down at her hand. Looked up at him. Not with doubt. With something deeper. Grief for what she'd never been allowed to hold. The sky outside thickened. Landing struts whispered against reinforced hull. No call came. No warning. Just presence. She tightened her grip. No questions asked. No commands given. She stood beside him. Not claimed. Not rescued. Chosen. The first breach didn't come through the airlock. It came through the floor. A low, mechanical whine from underneath. Subterranean drills meant for excavation, not assault, redirected with purpose no human hands had programmed. The base jolted. Ceiling cracked at the edges. Light panels blinked without rhythm. The ground spoke before the enemy did. He kept her close, but not behind him. She didn't ask for shielding. He didn't offer it. Not because he wouldn't have. Because she'd already stepped forward. Pulse rounds ripped through corridors without warning. Walls that once kept in heat began venting smoke. Alarms failed. Motion sensors failed. He didn't. She didn't. She moved differently with weight in her hand. Not smooth. Not confident. But certain. No flinch. No hesitation when contact came. One blast at close range. One set of claws dropped. Another came from above. She ducked low, rolled into position, fired without noise. He watched her. Not for safety. For confirmation. That what stood beside him was not salvage. Not remnant. Not machine. The siege pressed long into artificial night. They lost count of bodies. Of charges. Of hours. One panel shorted out behind the sleeping quarters. The blast left a burn along her side. She didn't scream. Pressed her palm to it, grit in her teeth, gun still raised. They fell back into the generator bay. Two left standing. None left to fight them. Rain started outside without signal. Wind peeled against scorched siding. The storm above the base returned, this time with nothing to hide. She sat against the wall. Legs stretched, shoulder bleeding, fingers still locked around her weapon. He knelt across from her, chest bruised, visor cracked, gaze fixed. They didn't speak for a long time. Not until the ship landed 3 days later. Human insignia. Medical tent. Data logs. Weapons tech. Peace banners waving in the wet air. She watched the officials approach like she was watching ghosts ask her to join them. Clipboard in hand. Translator active. Formal words offered. You're safe now. We can give you a new designation, a new name, a new place, a room, a life, a future. He said nothing. She looked down at the tag they handed her, blank, waiting for input, fingers curled around the edge of the card. She shook her head. No. They asked why. Politely, with soft tones. She didn't answer them. She looked at him. You held me like I was gold. He didn't blink, didn't look away. She lowered her voice. I think, maybe I am. She dropped the tag into the mud. Didn't wipe her hands. Didn't walk away. She stayed.